Hey, Jonathan.
Hey, Professor, how are you?
I'm doing well. Me and Allison are here for the next hour to take any questions around the honors track. And it seems like you're the first participant, so feel free to hit us with
Welcome.
any questions.
Yeah, I don't know, I think eager to get started, I guess. Is there anything I was just wondering like what the I guess onboarding process is like for this.
Onboarding process. Allison, want to talk about registration a bit, maybe?
Yeah, so what we'll do is we'll send out a Google form where you will put down that you are interested. You'll fill it out, you'll say that you're interested in the program, and then it'll come back, to myself, Professor Sirico, Professor Swarns, and we'll decide who's going to be able to enter the program. Not too hard, so it won't be
Cool.
hard, don't worry.
Gotcha. Yeah, okay. Gotcha. Thanks.
Any other questions,
And
Jonathan?
then
Yeah.
yeah, I noticed that there was a GPA requirement on the website. Um So yeah, I don't know if you saw my email about a week ago, Allison, when you sent the nominations at the start, but I didn't think my GPA requirement met it. I was just wondering if the requirement was based on this semester right now or based on last semester or like how does that kind of work? 'Cause yeah.
Yeah, so we have decided to reduce the GPA ever so slightly to 3.5 as opposed to 3.6, I think, which is what it says on the website. And then also there were also nominations from professors who specifically said that they felt that specific students could do the program in their opinion. So we took a couple of things into consideration.
Cool. Gotcha. Yeah, thanks for clarifying that.
Yeah, no problem. No problem at all.
Molly, do you want to go ahead?
Sorry, I didn't realize my camera was off that whole time. I mean, I got the email and I like just didn't even like know or anything like about it, especially because I came from like liberal studies, so
Mhm.
not a lot of information on like all of the majors and whatnot.
Fair.
So, yeah. Um, I guess I just wanted to know like an overall of like the program from like like your words essentially besides just like
Sure.
reading it on like the website. Yeah.
Yeah, so the department offers an honors track, right, which goes to the top ranking undergraduate students both in print and online track and multimedia track. For our class, which is the print and online, that basically offers you a 1 year opportunity to work on this big body of work, which is your capstone. The kind of non-advanced version of that, which I teach this spring, is just you do a capstone in a semester. This is a year-long capstone where you're working towards this really large piece of work, the largest you've done in the curriculum, that really allows you to immerse yourself in a beat and really do some almost investigative level work. Um, you know, essentially we spend the first semester in the fall, really working towards the DERF grant, which is a grant that's available to students to pay for some of the work that they're doing, especially if it involves leaving New York City. And then we are also kind of working on a piece related to your beat that's more explanatory, so you learn a little bit about your beat and what you want to do on it. And then the spring semester, ideally, you're doing some of your reporting in the winter with the DERF grant, and then when we come back in spring, you're kind of doing, it's a home stretch of just doing the capstone for a number of months. And we're working towards that every single week with workshops, with seminars. My background, I did this as a student myself. I worked on the year-long capstone. I got the honors degree. Now I teach the kind of more abbreviated version, but kind of speaking from that experience, you're just kind of like absorbing everything about the beat. You're going to events, you're talking to people in your beat and figuring out what kind of musters that level of a piece. And I would say by the end of it, you're working hand in hand with your classmates to all kind of bring your capstones to this finish line. And I act as editor, but also facilitator of that, and continue to kind of support you in any way, to kind of get this piece finalized. By doing that, it grants you the honors degree in journalism, and it also it grants you 9 credits in total for 2 courses. And then also for me, I mean, like of all the things, like those things are really nice and amazing too. But for me, like being able to work on one big piece that of a length that, unless you're writing a book or doing something that's like a true staff writer at a magazine piece later in your career, is a pretty unique opportunity. And I think I kind of look back on that time fondly of being able to do something of that length. And also with like these 12 people that you're going to know pretty well by the end of a year. It's just a process that I don't think you're offered anywhere else really in the department of that scale. That I think is, if you're interested in that, it's a really cool opportunity.
Well, thank you. Thanks for
Yeah,
the
of course.
overview. And then I guess my only other question would be just how like registration works.
Sure. Alice, go
Yeah,
ahead.
yeah, definitely. So we will have I will send out a Google form to of all of the students that have been nominated. You fill out the form, and then we select you, myself, Professor Sirico, and Professor Swarns, who's the undergraduate director. We sit down, we look at all of the applications, and then we decide who will be able to enter the program. So quick, easy. It won't require a lot on your part.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Hey, Bruna and Zara, how's it going?
Hey, how are you?
Great.
Hi, I'm in Paris right now, so I managed the time zone situation.
That's what Zoom's great for. Do we have, so just to kind of mention to this to everyone, so we're recording this for other folks who couldn't make it, and here really it's an opportunity for me and Allison to just answer any questions in relation to the honors track, how it works, the structure of it. It will be my first time teaching the year-long version of it. I teach the regular version right now, which is 4 months long. But as I mentioned to Molly, I did this as an undergrad, and it was an experience I look back on often, and it helped shape my career in many ways. So really excited to have the opportunity to do this as well. Prudence, are any questions you have?
I had a question about like how the class structure would be. Like, would we have like in-class time to work on our projects, or would it be like more like mentoring and like editing during class?
That's a great question. I see it as a bit of both, right? So the kind of way the semesters are structured as is based on what previous professors have done and what I'm kind of learning. The fall, we're really focused on learning your beat, doing a piece or two related to your beat, but also applying for the DERF grant should you need it to get that application in place, so you're able to kind of get a stipend for reporting, especially if it involves leaving New York City. And so the fall is really like exploratory and kind of getting your kind of the paperwork in order for the DERF grant. The spring is completely capstone. So it's full on. Every week we're doing workshops. There will be some teaching of seminars. I think the way to view advanced reporting, and Allison can speak to this with the curriculum, is that we're like, this is the real culmination of all your skills in the department, right? So by this point, we're not learning hard news and soft news anymore. We're not learning lead and nut graph. We're really taking that to another level and writing, magazine length feature stories that really involve, a number of sources, really immersing yourself in a beat. So there's some teaching, and there's more so like narrative technique teaching that I do. But I would say it's a mix of full on workshops, mentoring one-on-one and kind of like fostering a kind of process that's kind of moving you along each week. But I would say the first semester is probably be more of the teaching side. Second semester would be more like full on workshop and hitting the ground running.
I had a question. Are we all get to pursue different beats technically, right? It's not like
Yeah.
advanced
Yes.
reporting classes. Okay.
Yeah, so it's different than the advanced reporting non-honors, let's say. That's more issues based. So I teach a class that's very cities focused because that's what I write about. There's an immigration one, there's a subculture one, like there's all these different advanced reporting themes. For the honors, there's no specific theme. So you are all kind of on your own to kind of figure out what you want your beat to be. And also like it's at your kind of discretion. My advice always with that is just like pick a beat that you generally are interested in, right? That it takes a lot to you have to have genuine curiosity in a beat to write something of this length that we're working on. That's something of like 6,000 to 9,000 words long, right? So you have to really like the beat or like want to explore it more. And I always suggest that from the get-go. And that really spans. I mean, thinking back to my time, everyone had such different beats. I mean, there's so many overlapping lessons that you can learn from each other. But they really do vary. And I think it's also an opportunity to be like, hey, I really have this interest in this one specific issue or place or whatever it might be, and this is really an opportunity for a year to dive into it. And I think that's a good way to look at it, as opposed to like I feel like I have to do it on this, or like this is the one thing that maybe is expected of me. It's really a time to like get creative and think of a beat that can muster that kind of length.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
I just wanted everybody to know that in the chat, I put down a link to the DERF grants that Professor Sirico is talking about. So you just know a little bit about what it is he's referring to.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll have a lot more information about that, once you're, in the course. But I just wanted everybody, because it's sometimes we say words that we understand, but we don't realize that people don't use this verbiage every day. So I threw it in there in the chat.
Any other questions immediately? I can also continue to talk about some other things kind of related to the process. With the DERF grants in particular, with the grants that are available to you, it really depends on what you're writing on, right? So like it shouldn't be expected for you to know on day one, like, wow, I definitely need it for this specific thing. You're going to learn over time, like, okay, if I'm going to truly explore this specific beat, I might need some funding for that, or I might need to go somewhere, or I might need access in whatever way that might mean. I remember for mine, I didn't apply for it because it was something I did my whole capstone on, something that was in New York City that didn't require travel. So I didn't need it per se. But like other people did travel, left the country, or went somewhere within the country. So like it totally depends on the beat itself. And I'll be there to kind of help put that application in a good place and work with you to do that.
And they're also very helpful in that office. I had a small little meeting with them just because I wanted to know a little bit more about it. So even like equipment rental, for you to do your work is something that they are able to help you fund. So they definitely have a lot of you don't have to be very, very specific to one like part of your research. They're very open to hearing what it is that you need funding for, and they want to help you.
Yeah.
What's like the hardest thing somebody's chosen to report on? That's like, because some things are just easier to report on than others.
That's a good question.
Where like they really needed the DERF for it. I don't know.
There's a couple things that come to mind. I could also speak with Ted Conover and Robert Boynton and some other folks who have taught the class in the past to get more examples. We included some in the emails, but there's certainly more. One that immediately comes to mind is that I had a classmate who was from Nigeria, and she did her capstone on following a kind of like ceremony that happens in Nigeria when someone passes away. And she followed a person. Oh, it was for someone who died in New York City and their body had to get back to Nigeria. And she got a DERF grant to follow this person's remains back to Nigeria and watch the family kind of say goodbye to this person. Which is like the logistics of that are amazing. And like, holy heck, and she made an incredible capstone based on that. So it could be travel based, it could be access based, it could be all these things, but that was something that's like very sensitive and she had to get access that took a long time for her to get. And like hard from just like an emotional standpoint, just given that story's topic. That's one that immediately comes to mind, but I'm sure Ted and Rob have some other stories of the harder ones to do. Yeah.
That makes sense. That sounds difficult.
Yeah. Go ahead, Bruna.
Sorry, I was having some trouble unmuting, but like, what would you say is like how common it is for people to have their work published? After, I know since it's such a
Great question.
long form piece, it could be kind of difficult, but could you talk about like pitching after you've written and all that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you touched on the kind of hurdles there. So something of that length for sure can be difficult to pitch because, I'm sure you're all aware outlets are taking shorter pieces, our attention spans are getting shorter. The more common pitches are usually in the 1,000 to 1,500 words, where you're writing something that's more than triple that length. The success that I've seen has been when folks have been able to take out, because this is something that's super long, there's usually like parts of it, and we see this in magazines when you see asterisks or a subsection or a subheading where there's like a second part or a third part of a story. They're able to take out a specific narrative in that story, work on the nut graph, kind of reconfigure it a little bit to kind of work with the editor and pitch kind of let's say a 2,000 word version of that exact story. So lots of students have been successful. Shoe Leather puts all the capstones up. But I know several students that have been able to get their capstones published in a kind of trimmer form. The kind of way that I think is best to view it too is that you have all these words, you have all these different stories you've pieced together in this larger capstone, right? Ideally, something of a capstone length has several different themes that are pitchable in a lot of ways, several different stories within it that are pitchable. I think that makes for a really good story, a very complex story. So it's kind of taking like, okay, this for this outlet might work well, this for this outlet might work well. You almost like, compartmentalize your capstone to all these different versions of a pitch depending on the outlet you want to do. That's more in the 1,500 to 2,000 word range. That's not to say there have been students that have been successful at pitching much larger versions of their capstone. I think it just depends on the outlet. There's less, I think when you're working with a freelancer, there's less trust to publish something of that length. So it's just more of a process. But I find figuring out the kind of 2,000 word version for specific outlets is a more successful route. I could also speak from experience. I got some of my capstone published. I did my capstone on Mayor Bloomberg because when I was a student, he was still the mayor. If you want to get a sense of my timeline in my life, he was coming to the end of his term, his 12-year term, and I pitched so I wrote my whole capstone on him as mayor and how I thought he changed the city. And the version that got published was specifically a story I had in the capstone about his relationship with the labor unions of the city, which was quite tenuous. And they were just interested. It was like a huge news story how he had handled the unions. And then it had become news relevant again for some particular reason that I'm forgetting right now. So I trimmed down just that version of my capstone, took it out almost and pitched that. And that's what ended up getting published. Because at that time, also you're thinking about newsworthy currents. The labor unions, for some reason, were back in the news. So an editor was like, hey, I'm really interested in this particular point of a piece that you mentioned. That's why I mentioned, think of the different themes of your capstone and how they could be pitched in different ways, right? So there's 10 other topics I covered in that capstone. There's 10 other, there's so many other stories I focused on with him as mayor, but that one particularly in that moment was newsworthy. So I pulled it out. Any other questions? I think that would be helpful for me to elaborate on.
Mr. Sirico, can you talk about pitching a little bit more?
Sure. So I think you should be entering every journalism class thinking about how to pitch your stories. I think one of my kind of, I don't know how to phrase this. I think the thing that saddens me the most is when there's such good stories in class and they don't go anywhere. And then I see that exact same story published 2 years later in the New York Times or something or whatever. Because you all have such good senses of what's going on around campus, but also around the city. And I think that's why I enter every class trying to figure out how to get all of your stories published as much as possible. That same kind of ethos will apply to the capstone. I mean, I think you should all be thinking about different outlets that could publish your work, different editors you might want to be talking to, things like that. I'll also do my due diligence, bringing in editors throughout the year for sure, which I've done in a lot of my classes before, to get a sense of what they're looking for and what's relevant. with pitching, it's the kind of the merits of it all are that you have really done your homework on an outlet. They publish stuff related to your beat, obviously. They've in doing your homework, that also means that you know that they haven't published anything like the exact same story about as your capstone, right? You've done your homework, because that's could be egg on your face. And then also you've kind of figured out how to get down your story to like really quick 1 to 2 paragraphs, right? And I think that's the challenge. How do I synthesize this whole thing that I know is complex, I know has a lot of different moving pieces, especially the capstone, to like, how can I convince an editor within a minute that this is something worth their time? So we will definitely work hand in hand on those pitches. I do that in all my classes. Bruna and Zara might know, as previous students of mine, that we work on pitches all the time, and we get through kind of like, here's what the first paragraph looks like, here's what the second paragraph looks like, and here's how you explain who you are and why you think you're a good person to tell that story. But truly, I mean, like, entering this class, thinking through why your beat is particularly important in that moment, which will be convincing for me as your professor, of like why you should go forward with the full-on capstone, but also thinking through like, why would an editor care about the story right now? What's kind of interesting about it? What's newsworthy about it? Why is it applicable to this beat or this area of interest? Those are all questions we'll be asking and figuring out throughout the year. Any other questions? Another point that I wanted to touch upon is that it's also an opportunity. I mean, print and online, this will obviously be a text-focused project, but at the same time, there's room for lessons you've learned with multimedia. So if you wanted to take photos with, that's what Allison mentioned with the equipment rental. If you wanted to take out a DSLR camera from our closet, that's possible, and you take beautiful photos of whatever you're doing your story on. If you wanted to learn how to, things are, if you want to learn how to clip together a quick video, that's possible. I think, again, since the text will be the main focus, all that will be additive, right? That's not required of you to do. There should be some multimedia component, but it's also a fun opportunity to experiment a bit with taking photos and clipping together quick videos that can explain your topic even more. I think always we should be teaching different formats. So it's not just like, we're just a text only class, nothing else matters. It's a good opportunity to kind of add that in and have fun with it as well.
Professor, some students have asked me, and I think you kind of touched on this a little bit when you were talking about how your piece got published, but they've asked me, why? Why should I do this? Why should I do this program? Why should I have my advanced reporting last an extra semester? What is the advantages to my career going forward?
Yeah. Yes. That's a great question. I would say the main advantage is when you graduate from this department, I mean, you're showing yourself to be a reliable reporter, right? You've done this body of work, you've accumulated X number of clips, you've done internships, all those things. But to show an editor, or at an outlet that you want to work for, or an editor that you're just interested in pitching at some point, like, hey, I like spent a whole year working on like a 9,000 word piece. Like, for me, that establishes you as someone that like has the bandwidth and has the kind of like mental reporting, emotional bandwidth to handle like an assignment of that length, which I think to me is impressive on a resume or a CV. I think it shows that you have the dedication to a story, how to navigate a beat. That is no easy task by any means. I mean, it's like true thesis level in a lot of ways. Which is a bit different than for journalism. It's a bit different. But also it's to show that like you had the brain to like take on that assignment over a year and work on it, which is something that like lots and lots of staff writers have to do. They have to develop a beat and they have to work on something of that length. So I think for like, besides what I said earlier, where like it's an opportunity to immerse yourself in a beat that's quite rare, in the department at least. I also think that just like it really cements yourself as someone who is capable, as a reporter, as a storyteller, as a writer, to to editors. I think for me, that's just like, if I was to know that like your magnum opus from your curriculum was this length, I think that just like makes you stand out. For me, it was like interesting because mine was formulative in the way that I now write about the city all the time and I cover the mayors and all that stuff, which was funny because at the time, like I knew I had that interest and then it would come back later in my life. But it was like I learned so much from studying City Hall for a year, like so much stuff that would then become applicable to my beat years later. And it got to like I left, I hit the ground running with covering City Hall shortly after that, having already known all the agencies, all the important power players, because I just spent the whole year researching it. So I think that's something that, just from like an information as an awareness as a beat reporter, kind of it just gave me the kind of advantage over other reporters where I was like, I just spent the last year knowing this, like studying this. I know generally who to kind of talk to, who my sources are. There's still sources from that capstone that I like know 10 years later, over 10 years later now, which is still pretty crazy. But like, I don't know, for me, that was something that was consequential just from an awareness as a reporter.
Maybe, Professor, can you just talk about
Yeah.
like how many students, I know you said a small number,
Mhm.
what that means for how the course gets taught and received by the students due to that size of the class?
Sure. So I would say that, I mean, the biggest difference from you all, and I'm sure this is you know, what stands out is that you're taking a course for a year, which I'm sure you've never done before, right? Like a course that lasts for both semesters and what that looks like. Um, I like still to this day keep in touch with classmates from my capstone, if you can believe it. And they're all doing such different work. It's really cool. But like because of that, because you're together with the same group of students for a year, and then you graduate together at the end. Um, that is a quite special experience that you don't have in your other classes. You come in for 4 months and then you're out. With this, because you're spending the fall, winter, and spring together, I expected, or I think it would come quite naturally, is that you really know each other's capstone really, really well. You have read all of them by the end. You've helped edit, you've helped comment, you've helped all, you all kind of work to get yourselves across the finish line and kind of get those pieces in a good place. But it's like you just don't have that level of contact in other classes. And I'll be kind of arranging and assembling the class for you all to be, I mean, for it to be a true newsroom, you should be knowing what else is being written. And I think just given the time that's lent to us, this is a quite like, unique experience to do that. So there'll be like tons and tons of workshops, tons of meetings with me one-on-one, and then also in a group setting. I do lots of brainstorms all the time in my classes where we all spitball our ideas together. We're meeting once a week for over 3 hours, so we have lots of time to debrief. Where's everyone at? What are we talking through? But you should leave the class after a year, having really, really solidified these relationships with your classmates where you really know, like you all went through this journey together. And because it's all in completely different pieces, you all kind of helped each other kind of formulate those ideas and get them to a good place. So I think this specific, just because the time here, you're going to have a different relationship with your classmates in the capstone experience that you would have elsewhere. Trying to think what else we can cover,
Yeah, I
Allison.
was trying to think, like, I was seeing if anybody else had joined us or if anybody else had any other questions about the program. I'm trying to think of what, like, what students have responded to me about the program when they received their information that they were nominated for it.
The other point I'll make about around pitching too is that the difference I think also that exists between between now and the time when I was at NYU as an undergrad is that we now have a person whose job it is to help students get published, which is amazing. I wish we had that, when I was a student. But we have a publications director, Whitney Dangerfield, who is a close friend and colleague of mine. Me and Whitney teach a whole class around pitching stories over the summer. And Whitney will definitely be a vital part of our class, helping students think through their capstone. She does that regularly with students. So we have resources within the department, in addition to myself as a professor, to kind of think through versions of your capstone that could be pitched, or where to go next if you're kind of feeling like lost with sources. We have tons of resources within the department, additive resources, I would say, to help out here for sure.
Professor, sometimes our students, even though they're in their last year, they still have to take some elective courses. Is there anything that you would suggest to complement the honors program elective wise?
That's a great question. I would suggest there's two separate things I would suggest. We have so many great electives around different forms of journalism, whether that's literary, op-ed writing, like kind of more historical journalism, like beat journalism from the 50s, literary journalism from the 60s, 70s, gonzo journalism. Because we're writing something of magazine length, this is not going to be your, feature that you learn in inquiry or the beat, right? It's going to be a kind of much more advanced version of that. So I would suggest any elective that looks at all these paths. I mean, like if you've read any of like the great beat writers of the 50s and 60s, they were writing stories of this length. Learning different ways of telling stories, different ways that people approach these long form narratives in these different eras of journalism, I think would be really helpful to read or to take. The other thing I would suggest, electives that add even more multimedia skills or any sort of other storytelling skills. I love that multimedia is required now. It was not during my time. So when I had to come to take pictures or figure out videos for my capstone, I was a bit of like, what do I do next? So any sort of electives, that kind of build on your multimedia, the inquiry multimedia course you took, whether that's photojournalism, whether that's video editing, data journalism, anything like that, I think will just be skills that will be helpful in this class for sure. I know photojournalism is a popular elective. I think there's a data elective, but anything like that, again, that just adds more skills to your toolbox will be helpful here. That's a great question, though.
I actually have another question.
Sure.
When will we know like officially that we're like, I guess, accepted into the honors program?
Go ahead, Alice.
Yeah, so we're gonna get that application out to students definitely before, obviously very soon, because we want you to be able to register as soon as registration is open. So that'll get the application will get sent out this week. We'll make sure we go through it. We'll have a due date on that. Probably trying to think of what the heck. Date are we in here? We're at the 10th. So yeah, so we're gonna definitely have to get that back out to everybody before spring break.
Yeah. And I think the way we structured it was that instead of doing the form, like, here's this application, here's a little bit about the class, here's the application, we found that like that adds another step, because then when you find out about it and it maybe doesn't work for you, it just like adds another step. So we figured talking to everyone first, getting the information out about what you're all looking for before you put in the application would just be helpful, rather than making it like almost a redundant, and it like reducing redundancies.
Thank you.
Could you talk a little bit about what you have to do for the application? Like, do you have to submit any like samples or anything?
Yeah, so it's really just a short Google form, and it's really, I don't believe in the past, and maybe Professor Sirico, you can let me know if there has been any actual writing samples. I think especially since we have asked professors to nominate students this time
Yeah.
around, I don't think a sample is necessary. So we just, because we kind of have our feel down to like who we think is qualified to take the course. So it's really about, do you want to take the course? And then we just have to make sure that everything, all of our I's are dotted and our T's are crossed so that we can
That's
make sure
exactly
that it's
right.
the right fit.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's more so of kind of sparking interest rather than applying for a job or an internship where there's a criteria in that way.
I see we have somebody else that joined.
Yeah.
Dorothy, did you have any questions for Professor Sirico or myself?
Hi, sorry, my camera is not working, but I am
All
here.
good.
I was just wondering, I think I definitely would like to take the class, but I'm wondering how like the registration process is going.
Yeah, so the registration process, right before registration opens for, for the fall semester, you will be able to have whatever codes that you need or anything to register for the class. We'll make sure that everybody that was nominated, that sent in an application of interest, will be able to register as soon as registration is open for the fall.
Okay, and you're gonna send us that application of interest sometime soon?
Yes,
Okay,
I'll send it this
amazing.
week.
Great.
Yeah.
I've got class, so I gotta leave, but it was nice to meet you guys. Hey, Bruno. Bye.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Yeah, go ahead, Bruno.
Okay, I think I only have one last question, but could you talk a little bit about what your like personal process was with like interviewing and like how many people you had to reach out to and like was it more like document based like research or stuff like that?
That's a great question. It totally depends on the story you're doing. If you're doing something that's a bit more investigative, then it's like probably more, like you said, paperwork, court documents, maybe even FOIA requests, which is good that we have a year because FOIA requests take sometimes a year, if not more. And like you're doing things that, yeah, require a little bit more kind of like full-on investigative work in that sense. Mine was more talking to New Yorkers that were impacted by the mayor's policies, talking to unions, teachers, all sorts of different kinds of New Yorkers and different kind of categories of political players, if you want to say. And it was a little bit more analysis based, I would say, with some in-person reporting of things that I went to and saw what's happening. But like my friend, my colleague who I mentioned before, who like, went travel to Nigeria, it's a way different story. That's going to be so much more human focused, so much more on the ground reporting. So it definitely varies. I think actually as much as I love that I worked on writing about something about Bloomberg for a year, I think if I had gone back, like my reporting as the years have gone on, have gotten more human focused, more on the ground, kind of just by nature and my own curiosities. And it was very political analysis what I wrote back then. And I think maybe I have a little bit of regret that I had not done something that was a little bit more kind of in person or like a bit more narrative, I'd say. But that's going to just totally depend on how the story works out and what you're going for.
Okay, I have to head out, but thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course, Bruno. See you later.
Yeah, I gotta head out too. I gotta go get my laundry from the laundry room actually before someone takes. But thank you very much.
Of
It's
course. See you later,
helpful.
Molly. Yeah, no
you.
problem.
Thank you, Molly.
I was in class earlier, but everything discussed previously is recorded, correct?
Yes.
Okay,
But
amazing.
we're happy to go over anything, Dorothy, if it was helpful. Yeah, because those folks that were here when you signed on had been here for a little bit. So if you wanna,
okay.
if you have any questions about anything, we're happy to repeat or go through some other things.
What was kind of discussed before? I feel like I feel pretty confident that I want to take the class and I don't really have any specific questions, but
Sure.
were you kind of going over the structure of the class or your experience or anything?
Yeah, so we were talking about all those things. We were talking about the structure of the year, what the fall semester looks like, what your winter break looks like, what your spring semester looks like. We also talked about pitching stories and how I treat pitching just as a professor in my own classes, and then how I pitched
Mhm.
my own capstone when I worked on it back many moons ago. And then we talked about the support the department can offer you, whether that's our publications director, Whitney Dangerfield, the equipment that's available to you all, and then general, how we're going to treat this year-long project. When we meet once a week, what's it going to be? Is it going to be more like seminar? Is it going to be more mentoring or workshop? I kind of mentioned to everyone that the fall semester is going to be very like exploratory, like you're figuring out what your beat is. You're going to do a piece or two about your beat, and then you're also going to be working on, an application for a research grant if you need it for your story. That will all be happening in the fall. Your real capstone writing happens kind of winter on, because I would be shell shocked if anyone came into a class and was like, I know exactly what I want to write 9,000 words on, and
Yeah.
here's exactly what I'm going to do. Because you have to learn a beat first, right? So you got to learn what the stories are, what the currents are, who the people are, what you're kind of mentioning, what you're going to be exploring. And that's really the fall semester, where the winter and spring is full on the capstone.
Okay, that sounds good. Could you go over what you were talking about with the pitches?
Yeah, sure. So I've been teaching at NYU since 2018, and I teach a variety of different courses. I teach all the ones that inquiry, beat, advanced reporting. I treat all those courses with pitching prioritized, where I feel like I really want to make pitching and feeling like stories that you write in class can be pitched externally after the class is over, or when your piece is over. Because I was saying to Allison before and to the students before that, one of my greatest disappointments or sadnesses is when there's an amazing story that a student reports out. It doesn't go anywhere. It sits on our Medium page or on a Google Drive, and then I see that exact same story, published elsewhere like a year or two later by someone else. It's happened so many times. It's kind of insane to me. So I really try to make an active effort with every story, thinking about who are the outlets I'd want to pitch, who are the editors I'd want to speak to, how do I even talk to that editor, right? What does that relationship look like? How do I get, especially for the capstone, which will be a little bit more difficult, how do I synthesize my story into 2 paragraphs, and then convince an editor that like I have access, I can write the story, I'm a reliable person. We'll be going over all of that. I'll be bringing in editors throughout the year who will be talking about what they're looking for in a piece, what topics they cover. The main thing with pitching is always doing your homework, knowing what an outlet covers, right? Knowing what an outlet has done on your topic. If they should have covered your topic, ideally, right? You shouldn't pitch a climate story to a housing publication or vice versa, unless there's a clear link or things like that. Like it should be really up your beats alley, and it should have, it should be applicable to what you're writing about, the outlet. And then we'll really talk through kind of what that email looks like. How do you go about talking to an editor? What happens when they say yes? What happens when they say no? How do you follow up when you don't hear from them, which happens every single time? We're going to be going through all of that. And then I'll talk a little bit about my own experience where I pitched a piece of my capstone. I think the hardest challenge for this class is that it's almost 10,000 words long. It's quite long, which is a bit different than the formats we're used to seeing outside of maybe the Atlantic, the New Yorker, or New York Times Magazine, right? So, what does that look like in terms of pitching something of that length? How do you kind of pull out stories from your capstone that can be pitched externally? And I'll talk a bit about that process as well.
Okay, that sounds good. Yeah, so I feel like or how many students are usually in the class? Is it like a seminar?
We limit it to it will land. I mean, if all goes to film, we have a great response from everyone. It'll be in the 8 to 10 range, I would say.
Okay, cool.
That's largely just a bandwidth issue to grade and edit
Mm-hmm.
10,000 word stories that's
Yeah,
a book length.
yeah.
So, that being said, but also I would we really do want to keep the intimacy of the class, like, because it's something that it's such a unique experience to work on something of that length, to get, really close with your classmates in terms of figuring out what their pieces are and really working with them, side by side for a year, which is experience you don't have otherwise at NYU. We want to keep it so we keep some of that, where I feel like if you go over a certain number, just it's hard to have that kind of relationship. So we're balancing all those things. My own personal professor, and then also the intimacy of the class.
Yeah. Okay, I feel pretty good. I don't really have any more specific questions, but yeah.
That's great, Dorothy. Thank you.
Okay, thank you guys so much, and again, apologies about my camera.
No worries at all.
Thank you,
Alrighty.
Dorothy.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Great.
I think we kind of covered it all, you know?
We did.
I feel like they had great questions and, you know, they got the information. I'll make sure that the DERF grant information is you know, sent out to everybody. And then, you know, the person that I spoke to at the DERF grant, you know, he would be willing to come into your class, you know, at the beginning of the fall semester and kind of go over everything, you know, with students, answer their questions, you know, once they're in the class, and that's going to be super helpful.
Yeah. And then how would you suggest synthesizing this video and sharing it with everyone?
As far as
Posting it somewhere or sharing it with
yeah, so we can either, or both, right? We can either attach it to an email and send it out, or we can have Catherine post it on the website in the
Great.
honors section of the website, and then
I
we
think
can
that's
tell students, please go here to hear the info
I
session.
think that's great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just so we keep everything just in kind of one place.
Yeah, yeah, and there's a section on the website specifically for honors, so it's a perfect, and there's a video already uploaded there, so it makes sense that students can access this video as well.
And then what was how did your meeting go with the folks over at DERF at the undergraduate?
Yeah, he
research
was
center?
great. He was very, like I was saying to the students earlier, it's not as rigid, right?
Yes, that's
You
what
don't
I've heard.
have to like be going to a conference. You don't have to be, you know, going out of the country, you know, or anything like that. Like they just want, you know, they just want you to tell them what it is exactly that you are planning on doing and what you need funding for, and they will, you know, they're very responsive and willing to give the funding to the students. So it was very positive. And he really, I have some notes on it, but he was very like, you know, we are very willing to work with students.
That's
You know,
great.
so it certainly was not a situation where it was like, well, I don't know. What are they working on? But they've worked with journalism in the past as well.
Yes.
So that's
Yes.
helpful. So they know.
Yeah, that's exactly what I had heard from Ted from Rob. He said like the success rate is quite great.
Yeah.
And then also that winter is typically when folks are going, if they have to go somewhere or they want to you know, use it in whatever way. Usually it's happening over the winter break or like it's right towards the beginning of spring break, so they get ahead on it.
Yeah, and I was a little bit concerned because it said that students can't be in their last semester. So I was like, wait a minute, our students go from their second to last semester into their last semester.
Yeah.
And he said, no, that's fine, so long as we distribute the money in their second to last semester, or at least earmark it that they're going to be using it in their last semester. So it's not as, again, rigid, right? Like it seemed when I read the website, it seemed a little bit rigid. I was a little worried, and he put me at ease.
Great. Perfect. Yeah, that's going to be something that I would eventually love to work to meet with them as we're kind of getting going, just because it's a newer kind of process for me, the DERF grant. So just kind of if I'm helping students with their applications, I know exactly what to be
Yeah.
looking for, what the office is looking for, so I can help them the most.
Yeah, we'll meet with him again before the class starts. Maybe if you want to meet with him in the spring or over the summer, we can meet with him just to make sure that you have all the information that you think you need. And then if you have time in your class to invite him in, even via Zoom, to speak to the class, you know, and answer their questions.
That'd be great. Yeah, I think them coming in would be amazing.
Yeah.
Sweet. I think we should wait until the full hour now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if any more students will show up, but you know, we want to make sure that we give them the opportunity to ask all their questions and get all the information. So yeah, so I will get that application out this week to all of
Great.
the students that were nominated, and then I guess yourself, me, and Rachel can try to meet
We could
maybe
talk.
like the end of next week or beginning of the following, and kind of try to narrow it down.
Sweet. I think also maybe good to kind of condense Catherine putting this up on the website and that email with the application into one email. That's like, hey, this is up on the website and here's the form, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I'll just mention that I'm going to be remote the next 2 weeks, but available so we can meet over Zoom.
Yeah. Well, that's fine. I think students are mostly interested in meeting via Zoom,
Yeah, it's great.
having their emails answered in a timely manner. You know,
Sure.
they're not necessarily looking for you on campus.
Yeah. No, I meant more so when me and you and Rachel go through
Oh,
the
sure.
applications. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's
Yeah,
great.
we're all over the place with our on campus days and our off campus days. So
Yeah, of
it's
course.
just everybody always has access to Zoom, whether they're on campus or off campus. So
Yeah. One thing I was kind of floating, just thinking about more. So I think I might have mentioned to you that my partner also did the capstone.
that's so cool.
And she was multimedia, right? So it was a bit of we really saw both worlds. She was a year before, after me. And her experience was totally different, right? It was almost, feature length documentary. She traveled for it. She went to Abu Dhabi for it, got a
Wow.
grant to go. And one thing that I was kind of remembering from that time was that like there's not much interaction between my class and Jason's class, or the printed online and multimedia, where I feel like there actually could be a really nice synchrony where you're just like learning what everyone's working on. And like, hey, we're the print online honors track and multimedia, what you all working on. I feel like there's some lessons learned there.
Yeah, and it's so funny because I thought about that and I didn't want to put you on the spot in front of the students, but like my thought was, oh, is there any opportunity for the two classes to get
I think there
together?
should be.
And now you're already thinking about that. So
I feel like there should be for sure, but I don't think there was. I don't remember there was when I was a student, and I'm pretty sure my partner didn't experience that.
Yeah.
But ironically, like she had me to talk to about it, so like we actually met right after I finished that capstone, so like I was able to speak to her about my own process, but like an actual formalized setting where maybe we have an event on the 7th floor or something that brings all 20 students together and just like
Yeah.
talks about your project, or at the end of the year entirely, they have like a showing. Jason has like a showing of all the docs, which is really cool. I remember it now, which is crazy. It was so long ago. And then ours is a bit different where we show the pieces and like talk about them.
That's great. I love that. I love bringing everybody together because I think sometimes people who are doing something like, print, if they have a series that would be interesting to turn into a documentary, right?
Yeah,
Like, how
like
do
Dublin
I,
students.
like, yeah, I've written all of this and now I would like to turn it into something in a different medium. How do I go about that? So having some collaboration would be super helpful.
Yeah, especially if there's already students that have lined up them publishing it, have lined up them publishing the doc or publishing the piece that they wrote, having maybe like a panel or two of students who can talk about like
Oh yeah. Yeah.
we can make it into an
Alumni
actual thing. Yeah.
connection is huge.
Yeah. Yeah, that's something I wanted to also mention that didn't come up with the students earlier. And I think I mentioned I had two of the students in previous classes, so it was nice to see them again. But yeah, bring in alumni. I feel like that's something I do all the time. I'm already thinking like who's the alumnus I'm going to bring in for this class of teaching right now, because it's like there is no other person but better than the person who's gone through the experience. Especially if it's really recently. I also just find that like guest speakers that are similar in age is really great for students to hear of like it's possible you can get through this. Here's how I did it. This will definitely have a lot of guest speakers just given the length of the class and like who they want to be hearing from.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think
Yeah.
they'll love it.
Okay, so we're at like 12:55 almost. I feel like we're okay.
I think so. I think if
Okay.
anybody, tries to come in and we're not here in the last 5 minutes, if they send us an email, we'll gladly answer their questions.
Sweet. Okay, so I'm going to stop recording and then I'll send this to you.